Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the BattleBots Championship panel. My name is Luke Stengel. I'm one of the co-hosts of the weekly podcast Behind the Bots, where we share news from the world of combat robotics and in-depth interviews with BattleBots builders past, present, and future every single week. Tonight, it's my great pleasure to lead a conversation with Paul Ventimiglia, Andrea Gellatly, Mike Gellatly, Ray Billings, Julie Pitts, and Miles Blow from Bite Force, Witch Doctor, Tombstone, and DeathRoll, each of whom advanced to the BattleBots top 4 during the 2019 season of the show, which aired on the Discovery Channel. I want to extend a special thank you to Julie and Miles, who are joining us tonight from Australia, where it is very early on a Saturday morning. We are so happy that you're able to dial in. Before we get started, I'd like to invite you to send in your questions for the panelists using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. It's right next to the chat function. We have dozens of questions already in the queue, but we'll do our best to get to most, if not all, of your questions live. So to kick us off, I'd love to do a quick round of introductions, starting with Paul. So Paul, are you with us? Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your robot, Bite Force?
Thanks, Luke. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, and thanks for everyone attending virtually. So I'm Paul Ventimiglia. I live in Silicon Valley. I work as a mechanical engineer with my fiance and teammate, Tina. And I've been competing in BattleBots for the past 19 years. And I'm very fortunate to lead a team that's created the multiple-time champion robot Bite Force. And we're very fortunate to have done well in the past. And it's an honor to be amongst this group of good competitors.
Paul, I can't help but see your background. It looks so great back there. You've got your Legos, you've got Bite Force, from Hexbugs, and your giant nuts back there, right?
Yeah, so we're in the process of still settling to this house, but I pulled out some of the fun toys here for display. And the giant nuts make the table very heavy. They're 38 pounds each, so it's heavy to lift them up. My arms are a little sore right now. And I'm also just a big fan of Lego and building things ever since I was a kid. So I'm always into just making things and creating things, and big fan of Maker Faire events too.
Yeah, that's really great. On over to Andrea and Mike, who are dialing in from Miami. Can you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about your robot, Witch Doctor?
Hi, Luke. Like you said, my name's Andrea. I'm a biomedical engineer. So when I'm not fighting robots, I'm fixing human bones. So they sound like completely worlds apart, but they actually have a lot in common. And I've been building robots for the past 18 years, so not quite as long as Paul, but we did build robots together when we were practically just kids.
Mike Gellatly. I've been building robots. I got started in BattleBots IQ in 2004. And I'll tell you a little bit about Witch Doctor. It's been largely the same for these last 4 seasons. It's a vertical disc spinner, 4-wheel drive. We've gone through a bunch of iterations with the robot, just kind of tweaking the design year after year. And we did all right last year, I think. Not, great, but.
I'd say what makes our team stand out the most is that we try to build really competitive robots, but we try to do it in a way that's really entertaining and kind of unique to our team. So we're well known for competing in our skeleton hats and homemade skeleton jackets.
Awesome. Ray Billings is one of the most feared competitors on BattleBots. And Ray, I was hoping that you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Tombstone.
Sure. All right. I'm Ray Billings. I live in Placerville, California. And my first event was in 2001. So I've been competing for about the same 19 years as Paul. I recently worked at Intel Corporation. Here ways back, I retired. So now I'm a retired bum and I sit at home and play with robots. That's my job now. Tombstone is a horizontal bar spinner. Configuration on that robot essentially hasn't changed since it was first built as a super heavyweight in 2004. So I've been slowly fixing little issues, little iterations all the way along since then. And so it's kind of a fairly honed machine at this point in time. There's not a whole lot of changes I'm going to make going forward from here. It's been a great hobby. It's been a great way for me to connect with my son. And, I've got a great team, and I'm happy to be here with the rest of these guys because it's all great teams right here.
That's so great. And finally, I'd love to hear from our Australian friends, Julie and Miles. Can you introduce yourselves and tell us about DeathRoll?
Hi, my name's Julie Pitts. Miles and I have been working together for probably 23 years now. We met at uni doing a visual arts degree. So our background is in art and film. So we come from a very different background than a lot of other people who make robots. We originally thought we'd learn about the electronics a little bit more and make animatronic puppets for our stop motion films, but then got hooked, of course, and the films have sort of been put aside and robots have taken totally over. We started with DeathRoll in 2016. We've probably been doing the robots for about 10, 11 years now. But in 2016, we, the team, Steve Martin and Miles and I, and at the time there was a couple of other members, but in 2019 it was Glenn Rose who came into the team. Do you want to talk about DeathRoll?
Yeah, it's a vertical four-wheel drive vertical disc four-wheel drive robot, and it's got the self-riding arm on the back. Worked pretty good this time.
Yeah. So I really just have one question for the panel, before we dive straight into fan questions, because we have so many of them. And I'd love to stay with you, Julie and Miles. Can you tell me about your impressions of the journey to the top four last season? So you started, flew to America with this new robot, and can you tell us about that journey to get to the top of this board that season?
It was a pretty amazing experience for us, because in 2016, when we first came over with DeathRoll, we sort of bombed out pretty quick. And we did have a lot of time then, though, to sort of meet other robot builders. We're pretty big fans of BattleBots, so just to be there with everyone else was amazing. Last year, we sort of, I remember laughing on the plane over. We were just thinking, what if we just won? Just the idea of going over there and winning one, that was just amazing. When we look back, I think it just goes so quick. Everyone else would agree with this. Like, when you do win the next battle, your concentration is just so much on getting the robot ready and the best you can to go out there and fight again. So for us, it was constant. Is something we had never experienced before. And I don't think we realised it till a long time we came back to Australia, that what we'd actually done. It just goes so fast when you're there and you're working so hard. You don't get time to do much of anything else except fix a robot and go and fight. And we didn't get much time to sort of, move around and talk to many people this time.
We didn't even get any time to get selfies with all our,
No!
with all our heroes. So.
And in 2016, we got like 1,000 photos.
We got wall-to-wall selfies in 2016.
So it was amazing. Like, for us, the experience was unbelievable. Just winning one. And I remember one night going out afterwards with the guys, and we had the little pogs that you get. I think they're called pogs, aren't they? We didn't know what that meant. And we put them in our hands. I think at that stage we had 4, and it was just like, this is just, can't believe this is happening. We love it.
Yeah.
That's so incredible. I mean, your journey to the top 4 was great. And I'm curious, as you're reflecting on it, at the end of the season, what was it that really helped you get all the way to the end of the competition?
I think reliability, probably, for us, being able to bounce back again. I mean, that first fight with Endgame, we thought we'd had it. Of course, we thought this is it. This is just like it was in 2016, that we were gone. I think the reliability, it just came back every time. And, the design of the robot, I think, compared to 2016, we sort of took the tail off. And I think that just the way that it's designed and built, it just sort of comes back, it bounces back. And I mean, all of you guys would know that you've just got to be reliable. You've got to be able to go up to the roof and come back down on yourself. And, and not break.
Yeah, and all robots are one wire away from losing. So it's just making sure all those wires are really padded. Nothing loose. Everything has to have foam around it and locked down really hard. And you just got to be real fussy on the wiring. And also the other thing that we improved Steve and Glenn did most of the effort on this. So that they really redesigned the chassis so it was a lot tougher. Like the wheels have like gaps and they're shock mounted, so they can handle hits. Whereas our first time, the hub motors were just sort of bolted to the frame with like 5 mil of space, so it didn't have no air. So stuff like that you can only learn. That was our first heavyweight back then, so you learn through trial and error of what works and what doesn't. Because in Australia there is no heavyweight arena, so it's kind of like the first time they get tested is in the battle box with the weapon going and to see if it works.
I must imagine that's a lot of pressure. I'd love to go over to Ray and ask you about your experience last season and your journey to the top 4. What was the story like? I guess from your perspective.
Well, I think we had a really good season last year, but we had a rough time getting everything back together after the fire in the rotator match. So when they were, the batteries caught on fire and whatnot, and we're driving through the rest of the match with the robot flame coming out of it. When the match was over, because they don't show any of this on TV, they're trying to deal with get the robot out, and it was actually upside down at that point in time. So they stood it up on its butt so they could try to get the fire to go out, and they really couldn't. And they just sort of just let it burn there for 25 minutes before they could do something with it. When they stood it up, now it turned into a big chimney, and all the fire's coming up inside the robot, going past all my electronics, all my wiring, all my power switches. If they just left it alone, I wouldn't have lost anywhere near as much as I did. As it was, I lost everything. There wasn't a single part inside that I was able to save. I mean, it burned up everything. So we had a heck of a time putting together something that worked after that. And so that it was kind of rough. I was just expecting it wasn't going to work after everything we had to do. And if we'd had any other electronic failures going through the end of the tournament, I don't know what I would have done, because we used all my spare parts to get it back together after that fire. So it was a great event. I mean, obviously we always go to win, and so we got deep in the tournament, and we'll try to address those things for next time and do better.
That's incredible. Yeah, I had no idea that you essentially had to build a new robot there at BattleBots in the pits. Like, is that stressful? Because you spend months building the first one and then days.
We had a fair amount of time, so we had enough time to do it all. But there are things that you don't expect to have to replace that we had to replace. So like, the burning the batteries, give damaged batteries, that happens. But like, there was a bus bar arrangement on top of the batteries that I have used for 12 years that burned up and was gone. So I mean, I had pieces like that where there's just no way I was expecting those things to be damaged, and so we had to fabricate things in the pits to get the robot working again that I just wasn't normally used to thinking of having to fix. About the only internal part I was able to save, there's a titanium plate that the weapon motor is mounted to, and that was essentially the only part that I was able to reuse to rebuild it again next time. Even things that, like, it got hot enough burning the chain, it burned all of the oil out of the chain. I had to throw the chain away. I wasn't able to use that again. So I mean, it was just virtually everything inside the robot was gone.
Wow. Andrea and Mike, yeah, I'd love to hear about your memories of the 2019 season and this incredible run, that Witch Doctor had last year.
I think Paul and Ray had been to the top 4 before, so they kind of knew what to expect and what it took once he got up to that level. I think we were more in the camp of DeathRoll, where we were, ecstatic to be in the top 16, super excited every match we won, like we had won the finals, because just so excited to advance. We had one Witch Doctor the entire tournament. We did have spare parts, but we were switching them out on the same chassis, which as you get deeper and deeper in the tournament becomes harder and harder because each opponent is getting more difficult, and also your robot has suffered more and more with each match. I'd say our match with DeathRoll was probably the most damage that we got the entire tournament. Getting the robot turned around to fight Bite Force after that was a ridiculous undertaking. We had help from about 7 other teams, including Paul, who helped us out with motors right before we fought him. So yeah, we had teams giving us lunch tickets so that we would actually eat before the match because it was a long day. We had BreakerBots giving us extra tools so that all 8 of us on the team could actually work at the same time, because it was just so intense. We had people helping us grind down armor from Tantrum. The list goes on and on. So it's just the whole community really came together to help us get into that box for the finals.
Wow.
That's really cool. And Paul, your run in 2019, I guess like when you started the season, did you expect that you were going to make the championship again? Like, is it a given, Bite Force, making the top 4 every single year? What were your impressions of the 2019 season?
Yeah, overall, no, we never assume or expect any result, because in fact it's the opposite. Every single competition I have or year that I go on, it's just harder to do well because every opponent constantly works harder and harder and builds better machines. So way back in the early 2000s, there were a lot of really crappy robots. Now there aren't. There are really amazing robots, and any of the little tips and tricks you pick up along the way, everyone has those same tips and tricks, even if it's like their first robot compared to back in the day. And going into it, usually by the time the event starts, I'm so exhausted. It's what they don't sort of show on the TV show, all the builders have alluded to, especially I was pitted next to Ray and seeing him rebuild from the fire, and seeing Mike and Andrea repairing the robot with their team, just right before the finals, seeing the reliability of DeathRoll. The reason that matters so much is because we love BattleBots, we're super passionate about it, but it is very grueling and taxing on your body and everything. So by the time the event starts, I'm just relieved usually to get some sleep and see everyone. It's really fun. But that particular year in 2019, the day before the event started, I learned that my sister had passed away suddenly, and my family is all on the East Coast, and there was a lot of confusion about, not going into details, but the nature of her death and what had happened, and we did not know the information. I wasn't able to immediately fly out there because there were so many unknowns. We were delaying the funeral for some time, and because of that, I'm over here in California. We're packing up in 18 hours or 16 hours, driving away. My teammates really just stepped up big time, and everyone's close with their teammates, I think, but having really close teammates is what helped get me through that. And so at that time, I was just thinking, I don't assume I'm even competing. I don't even think I'm going to be there. I alerted sort of the couple of BattleBots production crew because we have contracts and I have business relationships with sponsors and things. So at the time, I sort of told all the key people, hey, I have no idea what's going to happen. But my teammates basically took on the brunt of the effort for finishing everything up. And my parents, because of the unusual situation, were planning to actually keep traveling. They were going to go to the BattleBots filming. So they wanted to come over there and visit me, to be with me as sort of distraction because they couldn't do anything at home. And so that was mostly what my mind was thinking about during the event. And I sort of on purpose kept that secret from most competitors and people in the building, because I wanted to have sort of the positive distraction from people that I really liked and take my mind off of things. And that was really helpful. And of course, I told a few key people as needed. And I had so many close, good friends in that building and family in that building. So it was really special to have everyone around. And competition-wise, we never assume the robot's gonna win or do well, and we treat every match like it's your last one, because the point of BattleBots really is to survive, not get knocked out, more so than it is to win. Because even if you are doing well in a match and any one wire breaks, you're out. And we had some really tough matches early on against Yeti and Hypershock, where they caused a lot of frame damage. And it was the first year we ever had two versions of Byte Force actually operational at the same time. And so we were able to immediately tear down one robot to repair the frame when it was really broken and sort of have the other one ready. And that was really powerful that year to make use of sort of switching between the two robots. And the robots are identical for all intents and purposes, except how they get damaged. And so that year sort of became a blur to me, but hearing the stories from other people reminds me of it and brings me back to it. And I think each match to me, whether it's the Friday, like the fight nights, or it's the final championship match, feels the same. No match feels any different to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks very much for sharing that story. When you go back in a couple months after the competition ended and you were able to watch it as a fan, watch your performance,
It was pretty surreal to look back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seeing the match for the first time on TV, I felt like I was watching it like a fan, just sort of not remembering what had happened for a lot of those.
Yeah. I'd love to stay with you and start jumping into fan questions. So our first fan question is from Owen Carey, who asks, I have a question for Paul. Are you making a special configuration in 2020 for Walker Chomp? And maybe you can give some context for this question.
Sure. So Chomp is the only robot in the modern BattleBots reboot that's defeated our team. With their hammer. They had a really great shot right into our weapon chain. And especially that year, the judging was especially about having your primary weapon remain active and using that to score points and things. And I've known Gasha and Zoe for many years, great team. So we don't really make particular attachments for specific robots, but we do have armor for people like hammer robots. I assume they're coming back with a hammer again, but anything is possible. And so the normal configuration of Byte Force that has just the 4 wedgelets, sort of like have this version of the robot is pretty underweight, usually about 20 or 25 pounds. And so what you don't see is that we can put on a lot of extra armor panels on the top, for example, whenever we're facing a robot with an overhead attack. And so against a hammer robot, it's pretty optimal for us because we have the most free weight. So whenever we do that, you just don't notice it, but we have doubled or tripled up armor panels and additional armor over the motor area. And ever since we fought Chomp, we did specifically add more armor. We knew about this before the event, but we just ran out of time and energy and money to armor every part of the robot. So after that event, we added thick plastic armor and machined aluminum billet front armor chain guard. We've had that ever since.
This coming season of BattleBots, there's a super heavyweight bonus for walkers, and Zoe and Yasha are returning with a walking version of Chomp that is allowed to weigh up to 500 pounds. So that's probably one of the most exciting kind of new additions to the competition this year. And I would imagine that the producers would match the two of you again, for this kind of grudge match. And I'm really excited to see that. We have another fan question from Gil Hova, who asks, in one of the matches last season, Byte Force took out Uppercut with 1 hit. I noticed that Paul didn't go for a weapon-on-weapon hit. Instead, he aimed for Uppercut's front corner. Are there generally parts of a bot you aim for that are juicier targets than others? And are there sorts of builds that produce geometric weak spots?
There is more of a timing situation than a particular area of a robot to hit. And there's also areas I avoid more than areas I aim for. So in the case of Uppercut, it was actually one of the most challenging matches for me to drive in, even though it was very short. Because they just did something a little unexpected that I hadn't planned on. I think I was going to go box rush them, but they sat in place and just rotated. and they have these long forks out in front. So I didn't want to just drive up their forks into their spinner. So in that case, I did a little sort of jog maneuver, and the moment they were off, slow to respond, we just drive in fast at an angle, and that's really optimal for us. So it looks like we like to face people head on. That's not my first choice. I always want to face someone where I'm catching their corner. So anytime someone exposes any type of edge or corner at all, I just want to plow forward to that. I don't really look at what part of their robot that is. And generally, if it's front onto their robot, I have to decide if we should disengage or go for it or not. Usually it depends on if we think we can get underneath them.
And finally, I have a fun fan question from Francois Pelsier about the giant nut that's in the background. So what are you going to build with those huge nuts and bolts? So from what I understand, those are real nuts and bolts, and that the giant nut's like 22 pounds, something like that. They actually have it specially machined. You could, I guess, build something with it, right?
So they're 38 pounds of solid aluminum. They do function as real nuts. I mean, they are real pieces of metal, but no one would use this identical nut because they're aluminum, and anything of that size would certainly be steel in a real application. They do fit with the giant bolt. I was able to test that with the huge team over at WPI one day, where we threaded the hex giant nut onto the bolt. And Ray has both, I think, so Ray can do that
I
himself.
have them both, and they do thread together. Yeah.
I'm jealous of that. And I don't have a plan to build something particular with them, but I would like to have some type of trophy mantle or something like that. Tina and I are working on our house now, and so I haven't set that up yet, but I'd love to have them on display. And I would always want to build something like a smaller version. We've talked about it in our team for our teammates and sponsors as a gift. So I plan on doing some more research on it in the future, but I don't know if it's like exactly to scale of a certain nut or not. I know it's sort of hand machined by an old school machine shop up in Alameda or Berkeley, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I wanted to head over to Australia with Julian Miles and ask you a couple questions about DeathRoll. We got so many fan questions from Australia. A lot of questions about the local robotics scene. So Brandon Carr asks that exact question. Can you tell us about the robot fighting scene in Australia?
Right. It's pretty active, actually. I mean, not right at the moment, but it has been. And back in 10, 11 years ago, when we actually found a magazine in a second-hand shop, and it had these robots in it. And we work in the special effects industry, and we thought, how come we haven't seen these before? So we got in contact with the local. We looked online and it said Robo Wars Australia. So we got in contact and went to the first competition that we'd ever seen before. And it was just featherweights sort of fighting in an arena without a roof on way back then. But then we didn't have very many spinners either back then. So it's been here for so long, but these guys have sort of been doing it, like Steve and Glenn, and there's guys down in Victoria. They've been doing it for ages. So they're pretty quiet and they're pretty modest, and I think maybe that's like how it is in most places. It's kind of it was hard to find, but eventually we did, and we got into it that way. It slows down and then picks up again when some of the core people seem to move around Australia. They'll move states. And in 2016, when we went over to BattleBots, we were really excited when we saw, we call them ant weights. I think they're insect weights over there. I'm not sure. We've got 150 gram ones. And how excited everyone was about it over there. And it was like a big deal. So when we came back, we thought, let's try and get the ant weights back working again here in Australia, because it had died down a bit. People had moved around. At about the same time, there was South Australia starting to have a club, and then Victoria, and then we've got the Ipswich Robotics Sports Group. So there are small groups around Australia that do the ant weights and the beetle weights. Then we have Robo Wars Australia, and that's run by Steve Martin, DeathRoll's captain. And he runs the featherweight competition. So we have sportsmen and an open class. So it's quite active. Sometimes it's hard to find where everyone is, but we are here and we are building, and we do have competitions. We've just had a beetle weight, and we've got an ant weight coming up here in Queensland in the next month. So it is there. You got to kind of seek it out and find it. But some of these guys have been doing it here since the early 2000s, maybe, I don't know, late 1900s or something. But
since it was probably invented by,
since they probably
Greg
saw
Monson
Robo Wars
and
and BattleBots, they started, we were like backyard, most of the competitions were just in people's backyards and stuff like that. So, it's pretty exciting.
This is a perfect segue for our next question from Darren Kovach, who says, I'm a fellow Australian. How do we get our feet into the game as Australians?
Well, I guess it's turning up to events and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and then you need basic tool skills, or you need to learn them. You got to be able to solder wires together, or solder, as you guys say, and drill holes, things like that. You got to be able to do that, and then turn up to events, see what works, and then the ant weights are really good. In Australia, we have the 150 gram ant weights. So they're always good. If you've got a 3D printer and you can draw a robot design on a 3D printer, print it out, you can do an ant weight. And if you can do an ant weight, then you can send it to send the DXF to the laser cut place and get a heavyweight built. But the trick is, making sure the weight is right, and then just trial and error until it works.
It's like just build, just try and build one. There's lots of support out there to help you to get the things that you need to build. It's just getting there and building it and coming and battling. I didn't know anything much about building a robot or anything until I did one, and it was after the first battle was when I went, I get it now. So it took me to have my first actual 3-minute battle to realize, you need to have a tougher robot.
You've got to be able to steer it. And it's got to last 3 minutes. So any of those switches from the electronic shops, they don't work. They just explode on the first hit.
And a lot of times people seem to think they have to have engineering background. Like we get people say, I can't do it, I'm not an engineer. And it's like, we're good examples. We're artists. So, and as I said earlier on, we thought we'd learn heaps of electronics to build animatronics, and which we did. Very different mindset people that make robots than in the arts and film industry. And we really enjoy that part of it hugely. Just we've got a doctor in just a GP who builds robots, like
Dr. Hobb.
Yeah. So it's just like, I don't know, you don't have to have this sort of, amazing background of being an engineer. You can build a robot out of a found object. That's one of my great loves.
Yeah, well, in Australia, what you do is you just get cordless drill motors, and then just hack those into your drive system, and then you've got your featherweight drive. So you can get your robot driving for $50. And we have this scrapyard shop that we go to, the Browns Plains Tip Shop, and they have drills there for $3, ex-tradie drills. So we just grab those, and we've got a huge shelf full of recycled drills, and they all work. Drills don't break, the batteries break. So don't throw out your drills. You could be building robots with them.
Good advice. I'd like to move over to Witch Doctor. We have a question from BattleBots superfan Mary Catherine Carr, who asks, what as a team has kept you motivated to keep improving Witch Doctor? I feel like Witch Doctor's story is like improvement every single year, like really kind of this relentless drive for improvement. So like what's the motivation there as a team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the obvious answer is to come home with the giant nut, but we'll never take that from Paul, obviously. So I think, for us, it's really just the challenge, the engineering challenge, the design challenge to come back year after year and improve the robot. You don't really know, like DeathRoll said earlier, is these robots are 250 pounds and you can't really test it safely anywhere other than at BattleBots. So the first time you spin up your weapon is in the test box at BattleBots, maybe a day or two before your first fight. So, and then the first time you hit something else that weighs 250 pounds is in your first fight. And
Yes.
wires come unplugged, your hardware falls out or whatever. You learn all these failure modes as you go through this competition. And the first season or first two seasons of BattleBots, where it was double elimination and there was no qualifying rounds, you go there and you lose and that's it, you're done. But now the qualifying rounds, you get more attempts at kind of fixing your robot, fixing, maybe it's a dumb little thing that you forgot to tighten down or whatever, and that cost you a match potentially, and you can go back to your next fight kind of with your tail between your legs, but at least you do get another shot at putting the robot in the arena and seeing what it can do. So for me personally, it's just like the engineering challenge of going back and proving ourselves that we can build a better robot while still being, keeping it fun. And I think the aesthetic is a big part of it for us too, making the robot look cool and function well. And obviously we've had to kind of shift our priorities over the years. First year we had a 30-pound multi-bot shaman, RIP shaman, we love you. And but it was 30 pounds that we took away from, and it got blown up pretty easily by a 250-pound robot is going to just annihilate a 30-pounder. So it didn't really do anything for us from a competitive standpoint. But obviously it was a weight penalty against Witch Doctor. So getting rid of Shaman was unfortunate for the aesthetic, but obviously it helped us be able to put more armor on the robot and beef up certain parts of it. So I think just improving it year over year is while keeping it new. We don't want to show up with the exact same robot every year, but incrementally improve it. And we've always struggled with reliability, unfortunately, with Witch Doctor. And even this last season, in our qualifying matches, there was a ton of smoke. We lit on fire 2 or 3 times and barely squeaked by with wins. We had issues with our weapon motors mostly. And going into the top 16, we actually, luckily, Tormach was on site and they were able to machine parts for us there. So we were able to we had to cut a bunch of other stuff off the robot because we were right at 250, but we were able to switch weapon motors to long mags, which were, twice the power, basically what we had in there going into top 16. And just, we were able to do that on the fly. Luckily, we almost didn't. Production was, like, hey, come on, you got it. Your next fight's up. And we're like, we don't even have pulleys to put on the robot. But
yeah, a lot of people think of improving the robot, like improving in between seasons. But I think especially this year, we saw a lot of improvement on Witch Doctors just from one match to the next. Because like you said, it's so hard to test the robot that a lot of the improvement comes, you test it and it doesn't work and you make it better and do it over and over again until, somebody eliminates you from the tournament. So there was a lot of that for us this year.
It's really interesting. Mary Catherine Carr has a follow-up question for Andrea specifically. So she writes, you wear a lot of hats on top of your super awesome Witch Doctor top hat, Maker Faire organizer, Witch Doctor captain, author, inspirer of future roboteers. I would add, YouTuber. I've been watching all the YouTube videos, so that's really cool. So what keeps you going? I'm sure we could all use some advice on overcoming hardships in this time of hardships.
Yeah, especially when you say it like that, it really sounds like I'm all over the place. But I'd say it really comes down to being a maker and being part of the maker community. We're at a Maker Faire right now having this conversation because BattleBots is really a subset of the maker community. And all the things that I'm super passionate about that you mentioned that I'm involved in are all really part of, contributing to that community and growing that community. So, anytime I need motivation, like what motivates me to make Witch Doctor better, it's that I know I'm going to come next year. And even though Bite Force has won 3 times, his robot is not going to be the same. He's going to make it better. And we still don't know how to beat everybody, no matter how many times we come back, because everybody's challenging us by bringing their A game, So, and all these projects that you mentioned, in every single one of them, I'm collaborating with some incredible people. And yeah, I'd say anytime I need motivation or trying to overcome some challenges, I just try to surround myself with some of those incredible makers that I've met and kind of feed off of their energy,
That's so great. I have a silly question from Blacksmith Captain Al Kendall, who asks, what does the bird hat smell like?
Have you ever left a gym bag in your trunk for 2 or 3 days? No, actually, the real answer is it doesn't really smell like anything. I mean, I don't wear it casually out on the weekends, so it doesn't get a whole lot of time on my head at BattleBots just for fights and stuff and interviews or whatever. But anytime we do fan meet and greets or go to maker fairs or anything like that, we always make sure to bring at least a couple jackets and some hats so that fans can try them on and take pictures and stuff like that. And I don't think anybody's complained about smell, so I'm assuming it doesn't smell bad.
That's good. On over to Ray and Tombstone. We have a question from Brandon Carr, who asks, Tombstone's points of failure always seem to come from rather unpredictable places, like the blade hitting the weapon chain or the internals catching fire. Is there any way to plan for points of failure like these?
Well, I mean, a combat match is barely organized chaos. I mean, it's not something where you don't really have an idea what's going to break. You can think about it ahead of time, but all you can really do is go in, run it in a match, see what breaks, and then try to fix that part. The problem comes sometimes you'll fix one thing and then you'll find you screwed up 3 other things in the process, and then you got to go back and fix those 2. It's just a constant bit of updating over time. Just keep breaking stuff and, fixing it again. The easiest way to build a great robot is to make a bunch of robots that suck first. So that's the only thing you can do is just keep making them better over time.
Yeah, we have a question from Mary Catherine Carr, who asks, you're well known as playing a villain on BattleBots, despite also being well known as being the nicest guy involved in BattleBots. Do you have a villain name for your villain persona? And what do you do to get into character, this villainous character, to deliver us those evil laughs and iconic villain quotes?
Okay, so part of the TV mindset on when they're filming things is they feel like they need a bad guy. And you can't just be a dick. It's not enough you kind of have to genuinely have a chance of winning the event. You have to be relevant, but then you have to be sort of, the one everybody wants to cheer against sort of thing. TV thinks that they need that. And it became really obvious in season 1 that for whatever reason, I was that guy. They had just picked me to be that guy. And wanting the show to succeed and wanting this to continue for as long as possible, I guess, sure, I'll wear that hat. I'll put on the black hat and I'll be the villain. Interestingly, I found it was very easy for me to do that. And I don't know what it says about my personality to say that because I am genuinely a nice guy, and I had absolutely no problem whatsoever in just being, I could, you want some more? I'll give you some more. So I don't know. I don't know what that says about my personality.
It's really fun to just destroy stuff sometimes. That's really
it is fun to break things. Yeah, it is. So I guess that's it.
Mary is going to put you on the record here. So she asks, does Tombstone's tank steed have a name? Because I've heard rumors of the name, but I want to hear its official name. And maybe you can give the context for people who are watching.
All right, so we use a delivery robot to carry Tombstone into the arena, and it looks like on screen, because we're ignoring it. We walk in, the robot just follows it out and go in the arena. So it actually looks like it's fairly autonomous. It's not. It's being driven by somebody. There's somebody driving it into the arena. These robots came from one of my sponsors, NPC Robotics. They were trying to develop a platform for military use and police use, and that's where this started. And at one point in time, they decided to move on from that project, and so they had these, and I go, we'll take one of these. And the name they were going to have for these robots was Black Dog Robotics. They were going to start a new division of their company. And the original Black Dog was Norm's pet dog, which was named Jack. And so the first robot that we got from them actually has a plate on the top that says Jack. It was named Jack from the actual company that built it. Later on, we got a second one, so we actually have a pair of them. And because my teammate Rick is the one who sort of spearheaded the work on all of those. And so just because he's got a weird sense of humor like me, he named that one Jill. So we have Jack and Jill. Those are the two robots that carry them into the arena.
That's so great.
They're kind of cool. They're kind of cool. They're about 350 pounds, and they could tow a car away. They have an amazing amount of power.
Wow.
So they're actually really cool for what we use them for. I mean, they don't even know that robots on top. They're kind of interesting.
That's awesome. And then my final fan question for you. What advice do you have for all the future Roboteers who want to come fight Tombstone in the future?
If you're just starting out, the best advice I can give you is to start out small, okay? Which I didn't take. When I first started, my first robot was a middleweight, 120 pounds. And, you know, I didn't know there were smaller events out there. So starting out with ant weights, the little ones, that's absolutely the easiest way to get started, because you learn all the same skills. You have a lot of the same fun. You meet a lot of the same builders, but you're only spending a few $100s instead of many thousands of dollars. So it's a great way to start out in it. From there, it's just a matter of deciding, show up to a few events, build some things that you like. You'll get an idea of what you want to build going forward. And then you can start stepping up in weight categories to try to get up to something like on BattleBots.
So cool. I was hoping to ask Mike and Andrea this next question. What advice would you give someone who currently competes in lower weight classes who's looking to move into heavyweights?
Yeah, it's definitely a big step up. I think, you know, like Ray said, we've all built, or at least, you know, a lot of us have built smaller robots before the bigger robots. When I started, the high school and college class was the 120-pound class. So I built that as my first robot, which, you know, looking back was kind of a crazy thing to do. But yeah, everything you learn in the small robot scales up. It's a little different than just pressing like 10 times scale and printing that. But my advice would be to go to as many events and compete as much as you can, and meet people while you're there. Talk to the builders that are making the bigger robots. You don't have to do this on your own. BattleBots is very, very much a team sport. It's, you know, one of my favorite parts of the sport. So if you're going to build a heavyweight, chances are you're not going to do it by yourself. You're going to do it with the team. So find those people that are as excited as you, and share the skill set. So you don't have to learn how to do every single thing to build a heavyweight, you know. So yeah, my advice would be to find a team and put in the time to learn how to do it. I mean, you've heard that we've all been building robots for 10, 20 years. So we didn't just jump on and build for the first time on BattleBots, you know, which I think is a common misconception, because they're super, super active robot combat community that has events, I'd say almost every week before the pandemic. So you heard Julie and Miles talk about it as far as Australia. So it's all over the world. BattleBots is not the only place to compete, so it's not the best place to get your first experience.
Yeah. I'd love to direct the next question to Paul. So Mad Catter teammate Calvin Eba asks, what up-and-coming robots are you particularly worried about? All right, I don't think you worry about up-and-coming robots, but maybe ones that you find intriguing. You know, things that you see on the horizon that are new to the 2020 season that are interesting to you.
I'm a worrier. I worry about every robot, to be honest. And seeing the pictures this past year from 2019 to 2020, actually, I've seen so many teams really stepping up their game and building a ton of impressive things. I think, especially you watch a robot like Bloodsport, which in the past would have been an ideal matchup for our robot. There's nothing better to us than just a horizontal spinner with no floor scraping wedges or anything like that. Versus now that robot has, 4 hinged little wedgelet things and a stronger self-rider and a big billet chassis and more reliable brush motors drivetrain kind of a thing. So you take robots which even looked like an optimal matchup for us before, and then now they're a very tough matchup. And so every robot certainly concerns me and worries me about that. But I'm really excited to see. I love the sort of engineering side of BattleBots, and Chomper the Walker version of Chomp, for example, is one of the robots I'm most excited to see up close, because when I see a robot like Chomp or Quantum or anything where there's a lot of engineering and machine parts, I just keep staring at it and checking it out whenever I take a break walking around the pits. I don't usually get a chance to walk around and see all the robots, but I have a lot of time to check out the robots I enjoy many times. I'll spend hours checking out certain robots before even making my way to the other part of the room if I know it's really interesting. So anything with really complex mechanical bits and where it's not obvious how it works up close, that's the most exciting part. And of course, I also really like watching sort of the absurd robots. So whether or not they do well or not, it doesn't matter, but it's always fun to watch something like Deep Six spinning up in the test box, anything like that. If Ice Wave turns on its engine and everyone wants to come check it out. So any robot that's just loud and impressive and cool is still awesome to me. Even though our team's robots are more conservative looking, that's still what interests me, is the engineering part of it.
Yeah, that's so cool. Julia Miles, we have a question from Matthew Cahoy about BattleBots toys. So out of all the current bots without a toy, which bot would you like to see being made into a hex bug? Obviously, we need a DeathRoll toy, but who else, beyond DeathRoll should get the hex bug treatment next?
Well, Lockjaw deserves one. He's been building robots.
Oh, yeah.
Donald Hudson, yeah, he's been building robots forever, so he needs one, and his robots look so cool. He doesn't have one, does he? I don't think there's a Lockjaw one, but yeah, he deserves one. Who else?
Yeah. No, I agree with Lockjaw, actually.
They've got some of the very old toys from the early 2000s.
Yeah, he's got them.
We wouldn't have them in Australia.
Yeah, we never got those. It'd be good to see Hydra, I guess. That'd be a good one. What else?
I'd like to see Whiplash.
Oh, yes.
Whiplash, yes.
Sure,
Whiplash, one of our
and
favorites.
deserves it too.
Yeah. Not Witch Doctor, because they've already got 2.
Which we have.
We've got them both.
Oh.
I can add to that. I've been fortunate with Tina to visit down at the Hexbug sort of X headquarters, and they have a lot of toys in development that they're building. So it's not the toys you see. It's not sort of which one are they working on next. They in the summer have interns working on dozens of the BattleBot toys in all different scales. So they're constantly prototyping and playing to see what works well and plays well. So there's definitely a lot of things that can happen.
Oh,
I won't comment on which ones, but they have a lot in process, a lot more than you'd expect.
Yeah. The more the merrier. We want to see them all.
Yeah, absolutely agree. With 5 minutes left, I wanted to end with 2 silly questions, I guess, for everybody. So the first one is from EJ Crop, who asks a question for everybody. So weigh in if you have a particularly strong opinion. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
I think a hot dog's a hot dog.
No.
Yeah, I think if it's got the 2 slices of bread, it's a sandwich. A hot dog's, it's joined. So.
Exactly.
Okay.
It could be a taco.
I'll go with that. Yeah, it's a hot dog. It's not a sandwich.
Right.
And then finally, Ellie, the Ellybot Captain Ceremonian asks, if you were to form a BattleBots band, what would you call yourselves?
Well,
I'm wondering if this is like a super band, like, between, everybody on the panel tonight, or I guess just your team.
Yeah.
I would call our band DeathRoll because it's such a great name for a band.
Well, we'd be Witch Doctor. That's
I was just saying the Witch Doctors would be a great one too. Yeah.
Ray and the Tombstones or something. The robot names are almost like band names in themselves.
Just about. Yeah.
No,
exactly.
it's we're the Rolling Stone Bite Doctors.
Oh my gosh. Whenever people think of bands and BattleBots, I always think of, if you searched on the internet, you can find old Mark Satrakian and Greg Munson pictures when Mark Satrakian used to have foot-long hair, and they would do a heavy metal band.
Yeah.
You gotta look those up.
The first time I saw him with his hair all cut, looking like a businessman, it was like I didn't even recognize him, because.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us on this panel. Paul Ventimiglia, Andrea Gellatly, Mike Gellatly, Ray Billings, Julie Pitts, and Miles Blow. Thank you so much. We are so looking forward to seeing you in the BattleBox again soon.
Thank you.
I think we're all happy to be here. Yeah.
Loved it.
All right, have a good night, guys.
See you guys.
Hey, talk to you later, Paul.
Cheers again.
Stay safe.
Thanks everybody for watching.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it ends.
I'm going to end it. I'm going to end
Each
it.
other.
Bye, guys. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Step down here.
Bye.
Bye.